And I don't want to be the pastor of pasted smiles. Chipper superficiality. Blindness to our own failures. You know what that produces? Hypercriticism. Judgmentalism. If you don't feel wretched often enough, with a spiritual, godly, spirit-wrought wretchedness that moves quickly out into the embrace of justification by faith and comfort in an alien righteousness, if you don't move through that rhythm of gospel brokenness in life often enough, you know what happens? You pick on everybody. Look how she dresses, and look how he fixes his hair, and look at that stuff they do with their kids, and look at. And you want to say, would you stop that? I mean, Paul wrote the whole second chapter for people like that. I don't want to be like that. I'm prone to be like that. That's where I say, wretched piper. So, I feel strongly about the way this describes Christian experience. Let's go back to our crucial question. What was it? You've forgotten. I'll tell you what it was. The crucial question was, why is Paul doing it this way? Why is he defending the law against this objection that you've made the law to be sin, you've made the law to be death? Why are you going about it with this long, drawn-out discussion of this divided man? How does dealing with this imperfect Christian, Paul, and his relation to the law help you defend the law so that your doctrine of justification by faith alone will stand? That's my question. One more question to answer. Now, to see how he's thinking, put yourself in the position of his opponent. And think of the objections you'd begin to raise. Not just about the law and the pre-Christian person, but the law and the Christian person. Think of the objections you'd start to raise. And here's what I think you'd think. Paul, you said you got to die to the law to bear fruit for God. So you think the key to a life of changed love and godliness is to die to the law. I think you're dead wrong, Paul. I think you better call people to come alive to the law, submit themselves to the law, get under the law. And then, Paul, you know why I think that? Because all you get is verse 19. What I want to do, I don't do. And what I don't want to do, I do. That's what you get. That's what you get. That's where your doctrine leads. I've been watching the church at Corinth, Paul. I've been watching the church at Laodicea. You know what they say about the church of Laodicea in Revelation 3:17? Poor, blind, wretched, lame. That's the description of the church at Laodicea. I'm watching those, Paul. And you know what? That's what your doctrine produces. I think that's what he's got to deal with. He's got to deal with that. I'm watching Bethlehem. In fact, I'm watching those guys in their internet. I'm watching what those women eat on the sly. I'm watching these things. That's what you get, Piper, when you preach justification by faith alone, apart from works of the law. I'll tell you how to fix that. Get them under the law. Get them under the law. Then you'll have some real victory in this church. I think that's what he's got to deal with. It won't solve the problems for him to just deal with the issue of the law before Christianity comes on the scene. He's got to deal with the issue of the law after Christianity arrives in a church. And he does. That's one of the big reasons I believe this is about Christian experience. J.I. Packer said that it would be a very big hole in his argument if he didn't tackle the issue of the Christian in the law and just talked about the non-Christian and the law. The big issue is, what should Christians feel and do with the law? Is your whole attitude to the law, Paul, causing all this turmoil of wretchedness. Now, quick, an answer. What's his answer? Here's his approach. I'll just sum it up here and we'll be done with this illustration at the end. He gives 4 pairs of statements. One part of the pair is to say, no, we Christians esteem the law, love the law, concur with the law, delight in the law. You're getting us all wrong. And the second part of the statement is, we don't blame the law for our failure. We blame indwelling sin. Now let me give you the pairs that show you that. Verse 14. First, esteem for the law. We know that the law is spiritual. And then second, acknowledgement of indwelling sin. But I am carnal. I am of the flesh, sold into bondage to sin. Now that right there is one of the biggest arguments for those who take the other view than I do. They'd say, a Christian just can't say that. A Christian cannot say, I'm sold into bondage to sin. Not after chapter 6 where it says, we were in bondage to sin and now we've been set free and made slaves of God and righteousness. This is just proof positive this is not a Christian talking. So, you've got to come back in the future weeks because I will directly address that and try to show you, to my mind, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that the New Testament itself shows you can talk that way about a believer. Second pair, verse 16. But if I do the very thing I do not want to do, I agree with the law, confessing that the law is good. So he's saying Christians believe this. They endorse this. They esteem the law. And then he says in verse 17, the other side, namely there's indwelling sin. So now no longer am I the one doing it, but sin which dwells in me. Notice those words. Sin which dwells, takes up its residence, houses. So when you hear the phrase indwelling sin, don't think any theologian just kind of made that up. That comes from the word dwell in verse 17 and the word dwell in the verse 20. I'll read verse 20. But if I am doing the very thing I do not want, I am no longer the one doing it, but sin which is dwells in me. That is a absolutely profound truth that J.I. Packer almost died to find. I'll tell you that story in just a minute. Pair number 3. Romans 7:22. I joyfully concur with the law of God in the inner man. See, I don't think an unbeliever talks that way. I concur with the law. I'm not making fun of the law. I'm not calling the law sin. I'm not saying the law is death. I concur joyfully with the law of God. I endorse the law. I pursue the law. Yes, through the back door of my relationship with the risen Christ, by the Spirit, not head on as the decisive way of justification or sanctification, but I wind up in the house. I support the law. And then he says, verse 23, the other side of that pair, but I see a different law in my members, in my body, waging war against the law of my mind, making me a prisoner of the law of sin. Now that's indwelling sin there. The law of sin is another word, another name for indwelling sin. The law of sin which is in my members. Final pair. Esteem for the law. Verse 25 in the middle. So then, on the one hand, I myself, with my mind, am serving the law of God. And then he says, last thing he says, but on the other hand, with my flesh. He has already said, I'm carnal. So here's the downside of his division and the result of indwelling sin. With my flesh, I serve the law of sin. So his answer to the objection is twofold. One, Christians love the law. They endorse the law. They esteem the law. They delight in the law. They concur with the law. And Christians also believe and know that in them there is what is called indwelling sin that must be warred against